Imagine waking up tomorrow and finding money in your bank account, not from a job, not from your parents, just money. Every single month, no strings attached. Sounds like a fantasy, right? Well, what if I told you this has actually happened? Multiple times, in different countries, to thousands of real people. When politicians talk about giving everyone free money, what they call universal basic income, or UBI, the debates get heated. Will it end poverty, or will it make everyone lazy and crash the economy? But here's the thing, we don't have to guess anymore, because scientists have actually tested this. They've given thousands of people free money and watched what happened. The results, they're gonna blow your mind. So buckle up, because today we're diving into one of the most controversial economic experiments ever. Let's get into it. Let's rewind the clock to the 1970s. Imagine a world of bell-bottoms, disco music, and a tiny Canadian town about to become the center of a radical economic experiment. The town was Dauphin, Manitoba. Population about 10,000, just regular folks living their lives. But from 1974 to 1979, something truly extraordinary happened here. The Canadian government decided to try something that sounded completely wild. They essentially said, what if we just gave people money? This wasn't welfare with a ton of strings attached. It wasn't food stamps. It was straight up cash, deposited every month, no questions asked. The program was called Mincome. Here's the simple idea. Every family in Dauphin was guaranteed a minimum income. If you earned less than a certain amount, the government would top you up. The less you made, the more you got. But even if you had a job, you could still receive some support. Now, you can imagine what the critics and politicians predicted. They were screaming, people will stop working. Why would anyone get a job if they're just handed cash? The whole town will collapse. They set up the experiment, ready to watch it all fail. They studied every single aspect of life in Dauphin for 5 years, and then, just like that, the program ended. All the data, all the reports, they were boxed up, filed away, and basically forgotten. For nearly 30 years, the results of this groundbreaking experiment just sat there, collecting dust in a warehouse, like some kind of economic Area 51. It was until 2009 that a health economist named Evelyn Fagit stumbled upon those boxes, and when she finally analyzed the data, what she discovered sent shockwaves through the academic world. So, what actually happened in Dauphin? Everyone expected mass laziness, right? Ghost towns during work hours, an epidemic of people just sitting around watching TV, but the reality was completely different. The total hours people worked dropped by only 1%. That's basically nothing. People kept their jobs, they kept showing up to work. The local economy didn't implode, and the sky most certainly did not fall. But here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at who those people were who reduced their work hours. They weren't lazy slackers at all. They were new mothers who could now afford to take longer maternity leaves to bond with their newborn babies. They were teenagers who stayed in school to graduate instead of dropping out to help support their families. They were people with injuries who could finally take the time they needed to actually heal properly instead of dragging themselves back to a job. The positive effects were stunning. High school completion rates went way up. Hospital visits dropped by 8.5%. There were fewer instances of domestic violence. And overall, mental health improved across the entire town. Dauphin didn't fall apart. It got healthier. It got stronger. It became more stable. It makes you think, doesn't it? Alright, so Canada in the 70s, that was a nice story. But it was a small town in a wealthy country. What about somewhere really poor? Would it work there? Enter Kenya. 2016, a charity called Give Directly decided to run the largest universal basic income experiment in history. They went to rural villages, places where people lived on less than $2 a day, started handing out cash. And I'm not talking about a few families. We're talking 20,000 people across 200 villages. Some got money for 2 years, some for 12, and some got a big lump sum. Scientists designed it like a massive real-world laboratory. The predictions came flooding in again. This won't work in Africa, critics said. People will waste it on alcohol. They'll stop farming. They'll become dependent. So, what happened? First off, the alcohol thing. A complete myth. Consumption didn't increase. In some villages, it actually went down. Second, people didn't stop working, they changed what they worked on. Farmers invested in better seeds and more livestock. Small business owners expanded. Parents sent their kids to school with actual books and uniforms. One woman used her payments to buy a sewing machine and started a tailoring business. Within a year, she was employing 3 other people. Another guy invested in a motorcycle taxi service and is now the main transportation in his village. The money didn't make people lazy, it made them entrepreneurial. It gave them the breathing room to invest in their futures instead of just surviving day to day. But here's the part that really got researchers excited. The mental health improvements were massive. Depression rates dropped. Stress levels plummeted. People reported feeling more optimistic. Turns out, when you're not constantly worried about where your next meal is coming from, your brain actually has space to think about thriving. Okay, so we've got Canada and Kenya. But what about a modern wealthy nation with high living costs? Finland said. Let's find out. In 2017, their government randomly selected 2,000 unemployed people and gave them €560 a month, no strings attached. The big question, would this security help them find better jobs, or would they just coast? After 2 years, the numbers were crunched. Employment rates. Pretty much the same as the control group who didn't get the money. So no, people didn't magically start working more, but here's where it gets interesting. The people receiving the basic income reported significantly higher levels of well-being, less stress, more confidence, better mental health. They felt more secure, more in control. And get this, they were more likely to trust other people and government institutions. In an era where trust is collapsing, that's huge. One participant said something that stuck with researchers: "I wasn't constantly afraid anymore. I could breathe." Now let's bring this home. Literally. Stockton, California, 2019, a city still recovering from bankruptcy. The mayor, Michael Tubbs, decided to try something bold. They gave 125 residents living on low incomes $500 a month for 2 years. Critics went wild. This is socialism. This is going to be a disaster. Watch them spend it all on TVs. So, what happened? Researchers tracked every dollar. 40% went to food, 24% to essentials like clothes and school supplies, 11% to utilities. The rest covered gas, transportation, and medical bills. Less than 1% went to alcohol or tobacco. People weren't buying jet skis, they were buying groceries. They were keeping the lights on. But the real story is what happened to employment. Remember, critics said free money would make people stop working. The opposite happened. When the experiment started, 28% of recipients had full-time jobs after 1 year. That number jumped to 40%. People weren't quitting their jobs, they were getting better jobs. They could afford to take time off for interviews, buy professional clothes, or fix their cars to get to work. One woman was working 2 part-time jobs, barely making ends meet. The $500 a month gave her enough stability to quit one, go back to school, and train for a career she actually wanted. Now she's making more money than ever. The cash didn't trap people, it gave them a launchpad. Okay, so this all sounds pretty amazing, right? Why isn't every country doing this? Well, it's complicated. Let's start with the elephant in the room: cost. To give every adult in the United States $1,000 a month, that's $12,000 a year. The total bill, about $3 trillion annually. For context, the entire US federal budget is around $6 trillion, so we'd have to almost double government spending. Even big supporters of UBI admit this is a huge hurdle. One idea is to pay for it by cutting other social programs, welfare, food stamps, housing assistance, and just give people cash instead. But that creates another problem. A flat payment of $12,000 a year might be great for a single person, but for a single parent with 3 kids and a disability, that 12 grand doesn't even come close to covering their needs, and they've just lost their targeted support. Then there's inflation. If everyone suddenly has an extra $1,000 a month, what's stopping landlords from raising rent by $1,000? Won't the price of everything just go up? The evidence we have is mixed. The small short-term experiments didn't see much inflation, but those were tiny tests. Nobody truly knows what would happen if an entire country rolled this out. And what about jobs? A major argument for UBI is the rise of automation. Self-driving trucks, AI lawyers, automated warehouses. If robots and AI are going to take all our jobs, shouldn't society provide a safety net? But others point out we've been through this before. The Industrial Revolution, the computer age, we always ended up creating new jobs. Maybe UBI is a solution for a problem that won't actually happen. But here's something fascinating researchers found in all these experiments. Getting a basic income does untoast change what people buy. It changes who they are. Their whole relationship with risk and time transforms. Think about it. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, your brain is in constant survival mode. You can't think about next year. You can barely plan for next week. Every decision is about surviving right now. But when you have a guaranteed income, even a small one, your brain relaxes. You can suddenly think about the future. You can invest in job training. You could take a risk and start a small business. You could finally leave a bad situation. You can make choices based on what's best for you long term, not just what keeps you alive today. Researchers call this concept mental bandwidth. Poverty literally takes up brain space. It's like having 10 apps running on your phone at once. Everything slows down. Basic income closes some of those apps. It frees up your brain to actually function at its best. There's also what's called the dignity effect. When people receive money as a right, not as charity with a bunch of strings attached, it changes how they see themselves. They're not failures or burdens, they're citizens with inherent worth. And that psychological shift might be even more powerful than the money itself. But what about the people who don't need it? Why give checks to millionaires? This is actually one of the smartest parts of the whole idea. When you only give benefits to the poor, you create what's called a benefits cliff. Imagine you qualify for assistance, and then you get a small raise at work. Great, right? Except now you earn too much to qualify. You lose your food stamps, your housing help, and your childcare subsidies. That small raise actually makes you poorer. This system traps people in poverty and punishes them for getting ahead. Universal basic income eliminates that cliff. Everyone gets it, period. You don't lose it if you get a job or a raise. There's no perverse incentive to stay poor. Plus, it's so much simpler to manage. No massive bureaucracy, no endless paperwork. The millionaires who don't need it, you just tax it back. Their income taxes go up to help fund the program, so for them, it's a wash. It's a clean, dignified, and simple system. Have you ever noticed that in the whole debate about universal basic income, we might be asking the completely wrong questions? Everyone's stuck arguing about whether it would even work if people would just get lazy, or how on earth we could ever afford it. But what if there's a deeper question we're all missing? What is work actually for? Is it just about making money to survive? Or is it supposed to be about finding meaning, having a purpose, and contributing to society? Think about this. In every single UBI experiment, people didn't just stop working when they got a basic income. What they did was change what they worked on. Many left jobs they hated to start their own businesses. Others created art, volunteered in their communities, or spent more time caring for their families. The official economy might measure that as less work because it doesn't always show up in GDP numbers. But is it really less work, or is it just different work, the kind of work that truly matters? So maybe the question isn't, would people stop working? Maybe it's, would people finally stop doing soul-crushing jobs that don't need to exist, and start doing things that actually make a difference? I don't have the final answer, but it's a question that feels incredibly important to ask. So, let's get down to it. What really happens if everyone gets a basic check every month? Looking at the evidence from all the pilot programs, here's what we know. The vast majority of people keep working. The economy doesn't collapse. In fact, poverty goes down, health outcomes improve, and more people pursue education. We see entrepreneurship boom and mental health stabilize. People don't become lazy. They become more strategic. They invest in their skills, take calculated risks, and make decisions based on their future, not just their immediate survival. Of course, it's not a fairy tale. The challenges are very real. The cost is enormous. The logistics are incredibly complicated, and the political will to make it happen, well, let's just say it's a huge hurdle. Here, my take. Universal basic income is some magic wand that will solve all our problems and create a perfect utopia, but it could be a powerful tool. A tool to give everyone a solid foundation, a floor they can't fall through, so they have the stability to build something meaningful with their lives. Because the one truth every single experiment has shown is this: when people are given a chance, they generally try to improve their lives. They don't want to sit around and do nothing. People crave purpose, they want dignity, and they want to contribute. So, maybe the real question isn't whether we can afford to give everyone a basic income. Maybe it's whether we can afford not to. What do you think? Would you be at work in your country? Would you keep working if you got a check every month, no strings attached? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear all the different perspectives on this, and if you found this conversation interesting, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We dive deep into big ideas like this every week, challenging how we think about the world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.